You know, we go to a lot of trouble to make really good quality custom crankbaits. So how disappointing would it be to use it for the first 1 or 2 times and then find that the paint starts peeling off, or that the lure is not as tough as it should be, or it dents, or it gets damaged too easily. And this happens all too often, so a lot of people ask me, well, how can I make my crankbaits tougher and longer lasting? And the first thing I always say is, well, always use quality components, don't cut corners. And if you use cheap and nasty stuff, then expect a cheap and nasty result. And I apply this philosophy with all of my crankbait making. I never use copper wire, for example, for making the through wires. I'll always use stainless steel. The next thing is always choose the right crankbait making timber. And we had a slide earlier on this. If you haven't already seen it, go back and have a look at the previous videos, but I have talked about what makes a good quality crankbait timber, and that's really important for making your baits tough and durable. And the final thing is, and this is going to sound really strange, but you have to protect your baits from water. Now, it sounds strange because we're making these things to throw into the nearest lake or pond or creek or into the ocean. So how can we protect it from water? Well, the fact is that for anything made of wood, water is the enemy, and crankbaits are no different to that. So the first thing we do is we use a really tough chip-resistant paint, and we give it a really good, durable clear coat. And there are various clear coats that we can use for this. But there's one extra step that you can take that will make your baits so much tougher and make them so much longer lasting that it's just not funny. And it's really a very easy thing to do, and yet very few people who make crankbaits ever bother to do it. And that one thing is, before you start painting your crankbaits, give them a dose of a good quality, water-based, penetrating wood hardener. And the reason I say to do this, well, let's imagine a block of wood. Think about a block of wood as being like a bundle of straws. So if you look at the end grain, there's a whole lot of little holes there. And those little holes allow the water to get in. Once the water gets in those holes, then it can move along and work its way through the timber. Now, it's one thing to see this on a block of wood, but if we shape that block of wood into the shape of a crankbait, then what we find is there's a lot more end grain. If you think about that again as a bundle of straws, and you cut away the waste wood, you can see there are so many places for water to get into that timber. Now what happens when water gets beneath the paint? Well, it's the same as when we use timber that's not well seasoned enough. Eventually that water will become vaporized, it'll get underneath the paint, it'll lift and blister the paint, and eventually the paint will start to delaminate and start to come away from the bait altogether. And this is the primary way that the paint on crankbaits gets damaged, apart from teeth, of course. Now, penetrating wood hardener solves the problem, because what it does is it absorbs into the wood the same way that water does, but then it cures. And it basically creates a solid barrier to water getting into the timber. So if you were to dip or paint your bait with penetrating wood hardener before you give it a coat of paint, you've effectively given it this thick, impermeable, waterproof layer that will protect the paint that goes over the top, strange as it might seem. Now, here I'm showing the paint being damaged, and you can see even though the paint's been damaged, water cannot get into the wood because it's an impermeable layer. So you might have chips and teeth marks and scuffs in your paint, but the bait will still stay usable and the paint won't delaminate from the lure. So the advantages of using a good quality wood hardener: resistance to dents and teeth, it makes the paint last longer, it also makes the wood a lot tougher. Right? So it makes it hold screws better, it makes it less prone to scuffing and denting and general knocks and bumps that come with fishing.